All right, so I'm here to talk about two things. First is objectivism, and the second is the death of philosophy. I'm talking about objectivism because these past maybe 2 days, I've had interactions. One most recently with someone who was challenging me for using the hashtag objectivist, and someone else critiquing me for using the name Gulp, which is from Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged. On one end, I'm well aware that there's just a large influx of people who dislike Ayn Rand, who dislike the concept of, may not even really understand objectivism, but they dislike it and hate it because of the things they've heard, the things that I'm well aware that there's a group. I'm well aware that there's an innate disdain and hatred toward Ayn Rand and her work. And a lot of times it comes from people who have never read any of the work. It's mostly word of mouth or people who reference other people who are fans of her, like Paul Ryan. Yeah. I'm well aware that there are people who have a lot of disdain and hatred toward Ayn Rand and her work. Um, just like anyone, right? People hate Jesus, right? And not comparing, but just saying that there are always gonna be people who find fault in a person's behaviors and actions, regardless of what the message is, right? Jesus Christ's message was just love, and people found fault in that. Ayn Rand's message is just freedom of expression, right? And living and moving past the social restraints that we are innately born into and that we place on each other. I've always caught hell because I'm a black objectivist, right? And even saying that is contradictory because objectivism is supposed to be free of restraints and titles and limitations. But there's a lived reality that I have to focus on, right? And I can't dismiss the reality of my lived experience and just chase my own inner freedom because I live in a society where my race matters. There's a part of me that doesn't that there's a part of me that believes that objectivism actually no. Personally, I believe that objectivism is the philosophy for the oppressed group of people. Eh. Personally, I believe that personally, I believe that oppression should be the key philosophy for the oppressed groups of society. Ayn Rand was a white woman, but she was oppressed, right? Socially, white women are oppressed by white men. So creating this philosophy that wants you to break free from the social limitations, right? It's breaking free from the oppression that men have traditionally and historically always placed on women, but also knowing that there is a racial aspect, right? And Rand Rand doesn't have that awareness. She doesn't have that lived experience of living in an oppressed racial group. So that's where objectivism kind of falls short. I'm not a parrot for Ayn Rand. I'm not a parrot for any philosophy. I believe in objectivism. I'm a byproduct. I've said this before. I'm a byproduct of objectivism, Christianity, my own innate morals, my parents, social cues, Taoism, Buddhism, all of the different religions or ideologies and philosophies that I've learned and taken on over the years. They complete me and make me whole. So I don't expect certain groups, most specifically, I don't expect white males to understand the black objectivist's perspective. You can't, right? I don't, and it's funny to me, like the majority of objectivists are white males who are already privileged, who already have this innate social freedom to kind of live and exist and not see race and not see all the limitations. It's a choice of privilege, right? The people who really need it. Like I've met a lot of women who hate Ayn Rand, and I've always wondered why and how. Right? She is the realistically the prominent female philosopher, I think, of all time. I've had conversations with people on Reddit, and they brought up female philosophers from like Greek times, but they're no one compared to Plato and Socrates. I had a Twitter exchange with someone who brought up female comedians, right? And comedy is the comedy, modern comedy, right, is the manifestation of philosophy, right? What Socrates and Plato and all of those dudes were doing back in the day, comedy has manifested and turned it into a more socially engaging form of philosophy, more observant, more layered, and more focused on the larger issues of society, right? Not just the focus of self and who am I and me. A lot of philosophy is self-rooted, right? It's narcissistic. Like I said, so what's your philosophy, right? Someone wrote. I mentioned that someone tried to get at me for having gold and saying Ayn Rand is an idiot. So I asked them, "What's your philosophy?" But what is your philosophy, right? Not what did you read in a book and say this is what I'm going to follow in my life, right? That's religion. What's your philosophy? If you could name your philosophy, what would it be called? If you could describe your philosophy, how would you describe it? Objectivism is a core of who I am. It's what's allowed me to really just break free. I read Atlas Shrugged, and all I said was, "This is me. This is who I've always been. I've always been this person." And it just it didn't validate. It acknowledged that I was not alone in this world. That's what I've always felt like up to that point. Until I read Atlas Shrugged, I felt alone with my thoughts and my beliefs and my values. Having the awareness, having the sensory of just taking everything and knowing that I'm just a culmination of all of it. That book just honed it in for me. So I don't live objectivism day by day and eat and breathe it. That's religion. Like I said, I feel like a lot of people who follow philosophy, they're just parrots for it, right? They're gatekeeping. They're telling people what they can and can't do. This is how it's defined. This is all it can be. This is all it should be. This is all it would ever be. You don't realize that philosophy from, philosophy from 1900, from the 1900s, right? It might have some legs to stand on, but it isn't valid today, right? It may not necessarily be valid today, excuse me. It may not necessarily be valid today because philosophies need to evolve with society, right? As our social norms and social values change, philosophy needs to evolve. And what I rarely see is the evolution of philosophy. I rarely see people willing to include their own individual experience and beliefs into a philosophy to help elevate the experience and to draw more people in. Philosophy by nature is a very highbrow, snobby. It's a snob. It's part of a snob culture. Excuse me. And it's easy to. I've talked about choices before, right? It's easy to make a choice, say that this is who I am, this is what I value, and judge people for not being a part of it, judge people for not partaking in it or experiencing it the way you do, the way you want it to, or the way it's written in a book. And what we fail to realize as people who study philosophy and people who want to make philosophy part of our lives is that the lived experience is more important than the definition. The lived experience of the black experience is more important than the definition of Christianity, more important than the definition of Islam, more important than any. I don't want that. The lived experience of the black experience for me is more important than the philosophies that have been around for decades or hundreds and thousands of years. Again, that's just religion. There needs to be growth in philosophy. There needs to be new perspectives. Right? There needs to be diversity. Philosophy lacks diversity. It's a circle jerk, right? You can't understand growth. You can't understand freedom if socially it's what you've always had an experience, right? You may not have it on an individual experience, but there's an awareness that socially your group has been through something, been through nothing. Your group has had these experiences, your group has had these privileges, or your group has had this history of oppression. And that is important to note, because if you only focus on your individual freedom and growth and you leave behind, I talked about culture, if you leave your culture behind and the people who are part of your culture, right, who are still lagging behind, how do you make the connection to bring them toward the freedom and guidance and revelation that you had? I have to talk about the Black experience when I talk about objectivism. I have to present it. I include it as part of my objectivism because I know that the additional freedom, the additional insight will make waves and redefine the Black experience. And that's my responsibility. That's my chosen responsibility. So I don't need to be an objectivist to its core. I have my own personal philosophy that incorporates objectivism. So I'm going to use whatever hashtag I want. I'm going to speak my piece. I'm going to use subject matter. I'm going to do all of that because all of it is a culmination of who I am and my experience, and it is all relevant. And philosophy is dead because people aren't willing to see that. People aren't willing to understand that. People are gatekeeping. You're following religion. You're following a religion, right? Right. You're not philosophizing. I love that word, philosophizing. I made that word up when I was like 10 years old. You're not philosophizing. You're just repeating what you read on a piece of paper. You're just reading what you've experienced from conversations with people, right? The circle jerk. It's, yes, that makes sense. Yes, that makes sense. And no, that's wrong. No growth. You're not allowed to think outside the box. And that's the death of philosophy. And now we see that, going back to comedy, we see the death of comedy, right? You're not allowed to have free thought. You're not allowed to express thoughts. You're not allowed to say anything that makes people uncomfortable. You're not allowed to ask questions. That's censorship. So I say to anyone who studies philosophy, who is interested in philosophy, who lives by philosophy, even if you live by religion, I'll talk about being a born-again Christian a lot in the past. Find ways to expand the mission. Don't be a parrot. Find ways to expand the mission. Find ways to connect with other people. Because if you truly value if you truly value the mission, if you truly value the message, right, then you should be willing and open to finding new ways to incorporate other people into the message instead of shutting them out and telling that that's not right. That's not how it's supposed to be done, right? Christianity has how many denominations, right? And they all work in their own unique way. That's all I got. Peace.